Andrew Hutchison, mortgage broker with Mortgage Architect. So yeah, thanks again for coming here. Why don't we kind of start off with, kind of what led you to kind of becoming a mortgage broker? Like, I know we used to be, hard to believe, old roommates on McLean Street, partying. And
a few days ago.
Yeah, a couple days ago now. And, next thing we're both in the real estate business. You're on the lending side, I'm on the real estate buying and selling, and we're both kind of, you're a little ahead of me on the investing piece, and, I just kind of invested in that Airbnb here. So yeah, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about your aspirations into coming to mortgages?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me. It feels like it wasn't a couple days ago, but God, that must have been 10 plus years now.
Yeah, I think about those days all the time, man.
Yeah,
less worries.
I think with how much that property's worth now.
Right, I know, right?
Yeah.
I forget Buddy's name there.
He was a good guy.
Yeah, they're pretty good guy.
I wonder if he still owns that.
I think they only had like 2 or 3 properties. So.
Yeah, that's doubled in value for sure.
Absolutely.
If not more.
Yeah,
so obviously we knew each other back in college. I was going to Dow, you were going to SMU.
Yeah.
Graduated there. I had a few jobs before I landed on mortgages. I worked for a hedge fund administrative company called Citco out of Halifax, which
nice.
Like Des works there.
Yeah, I was going to say, you must know Des.
Yeah. Worked there. It wasn't, I learned a lot. It wasn't for me. I ended up moving on. I did some work on the investment in the insurance industry. And one big thing I saw, especially on the investing side, when I was trying to bring in people and help them grow their portfolio, one thing that they all had in common, anyone that had large amounts of wealth, was that they owned real estate. And so kind of got a sniff into real estate investing, really drew my eye to it. Always kind of really enjoyed buying and selling real estate, so not so much myself, but just the act of it. And basically what drew me to it was more the finance side of it, the numbers side of it. And I had an opportunity to jump on with Mortgage Architects, which you mentioned. And really jumped on to into the mortgage brokering world to run my own business, Hutchison Mortgages, through Mortgage Architects, just like Chris Crowell that goes through Remax.
Absolutely.
And haven't looked back. And I've been, it'll be 3 years here as a mortgage broker this spring. So,
yeah, man, well, it's great to hear you say that. I mean, and great kind of description leading up to how you got there. I kind of had the same kind of epiphany, so to speak. I did 9 years in consumer packaged goods with Unilever Canada, managing salespeople, had a team of 9 sales reps, 6 regional accounts, 3 distributors. And yeah, I kind of got caught in that corporate kind of world, and, maybe not so much golden handcuff, but, really got comfortable in that kind of consumer packaged goods world. And one thing, when I started looking around at other opportunities and other people, and especially people that I've found seem to be really well off, when you really kind of dig in, the common denominator there is definitely real estate. So that's kind of what kind of pushed me into it as well. And early on, like, having an interest right out the gate. I mean, I remember moving into not the place we met each other on McLean Street, but I lived on the other road, on the other side of the road.
Okay, yeah.
And this fellow by the name of Mark Holden, I don't know whatever happened to him, but I remember it was my second year university, and we roll in to move in, and he's there to give us the keys, and he's like sitting there in his like fancy Jaguar car, and I'm like having the realization, like, oh, people can like make money doing this. Because I asked him, I was like, hey, what do you do? He's like, I'm gonna just own property. And I was like, that's it? He's like, yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe he was a bit of an outlier. Like, I know he told us like he played a few games in the NHL, and I don't know his full background, but like he might have had like a good start, but he definitely seemed like he made some good choices too, because you always see him around. Didn't seem like he had a care in the world, just living his life. So I definitely early on had an interest. But you know what it is, trying to start your own business from nothing. It's pretty daunting, especially at like 20 years old. Like, remember what we had in mind, like living on McLean Street was like paying our rent and partying. Like that was about it.
Yeah.
So when somebody was like, yeah, it's all commission, you got to grind, you know, just like at 20 years old, like, you know, maybe some people have that mindset.
I mean, some people are, but yeah, I don't know if we were.
Definitely not. And I mean, I had a roommate at the time. I don't know if you remember him. He was the dark haired guy, Sean Gordon.
I just remember your brother.
Right?
I can't remember.
There was two other guys too.
Was there? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I just remember Mike.
But anyway, his girlfriend's father at the time ran a brokerage. What's his name? Francis McDonald.
A real estate brokerage?
Yeah, I think is it XP or Press? I can't remember. But anyway, I had just graduated university.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, can I have a chat with your father? Like, I was looking for jobs too. I was like, I'm kind of interested in this real estate business. Like, kind of want to know more about it. And he kind of scared me totally away from it. He's like, it's all commission, you gotta grind this and that, and it's just like wasn't my cup of tea, I guess, at 20 years old. So I kind of just fully pivoted the other way and just went right into kind of the sales kind of corporate kind of life. And
you almost need to realize the one thing when I graduated university, the one thing that really pulled me towards working for yourself was that I hated the idea that this is how much you made.
Yeah. I hate limits.
You can do really well. You can make the company a lot of money, and you might make this much more.
Right, your bonus impact.
And that just never sat with me. And one thing that I really wanted to do too, and seriously considered was police force, RCMP.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
And I said, I hate the thought of this is what you make, and you can get a little bonus or you can increase every year. And in my head, I said, well, the picture of what I want for my life and the freedoms that I eventually want, that won't be able to.
Yeah, your 3-4 weeks of vacation a year is in freedom, right?
Although the job would be rewarding as well, and so that was probably one thing that pushed me to end up going to business for self. But when you're young and you're in your early 20s, it's a tough thing for people to take you serious too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, like, there's a young guy. I mean, I'm a young guy. He's our age now. When we were younger. When we were younger. Buddy I went to high school with, great guy, sales manager of a Toyota dealership now, does great, lives back home where I grew up. He went into real estate. And I remember talking. I never talked directly with him, but I talked to one of our mutual friends, and he had just mentioned how tough he had it, and that kind of asking me, like, you think he never come out and said it, but I kind of took it in the direction of, like, do you think you're making the right choice? Because he was like, he's tried it for like a year and he never sold a damn thing, and it's like, yeah, well, I was like, I'm not him, and I never ever did talk to him because it was suggested to me that maybe it'd be a good idea to kind of like best practices, kind of like figure out maybe where he went wrong. But I was more interested, and no offense to if they figure out what I'm talking about, but like I was more interested in talking to winners than losers.
Yeah.
So I just never ever kind of beat that door down. I just wanted to know what worked, and where to invest my time. And
you can learn from both.
You can. But I had the mindset at the time that I wanted to know what worked.
Didn't want to recreate the wheel, just show me what works.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll kind of fiddle around, fumble, fall, and figure it out. So leading into the next kind of topic that's kind of been creating some uproar here is the Airbnb registration. And I know you've been in it for a while, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that. And I've just entered it, so naturally I seen this registration piece, and I was like, hey, Andrew, like, what do you make of this stuff?
Yeah.
So you've had a property down.
I've had a property, and I guess full disclosure, I don't Airbnb it.
Sorry.
I do long-term rent it, but I am quite familiar with the new regulations and the bylaws that they're trying to put forth, just because I have clients that do have short-term rentals, so Airbnbs, VRBO, and current clients that are looking to purchase based off of using them as short-term rentals. So that's making a lot of noise right now. The registration part that you mentioned was proposed a little while back, where if you're going to own a short-term rental here in HRM, you have to register with the province. And so that part came into play. That part I actually don't disagree with the government too much. If they want to kind of regulate or just know who's operating them.
Yeah,
and
just keep it.
Yeah, make sure that you're claiming income, or that they just want to know the numbers of how many short-term rentals they have. Like, how are we contributing to our tourism in this regard? There's a lot of data they could get from that. But the latest news that came out was that they will change the bylaws in the HRM so that you can no longer operate an Airbnb unless it's your primary residence, which that will be a big change.
Yeah, and like that's kind of a touch point for me. Some people might laugh, but like I'm not a big fan, and I guess it kind of comes back to working in that corporate world. Like, don't get me wrong, like I take direction and all and guidance and from leadership and all that, but like when it comes to like government overreach, do you find that they might be like overextending themselves on like what the public can do with their personal assets, like taking consideration the Airbnb registration, changing bylaws to force our hands into what some people might have been using as like a stepping stone to start potentially investing in real estate? Now they're like, well, you can't, especially if it's not your primary residence. Like people like me that are currently living in the dwelling that they're going to be short-term renting, well, they're like, okay, that's fine. But if you've bought a property and say they're your client and they're like, hey, Andrew, like, this is what we got, here's the financials, what can we get? And you map this whole financial plan out for them to buy this property, and it's all based on short-term rental returns on their investment. And then all of a sudden, government saying, no, you have to long-term rent it, which is, let's be real, in some instances, if you're further away from downtown, it's significantly less return. And then, the 5%, de-transfer tax for out of province.
Yep.
Then we're putting foreign buyer bans on for 2 years. I mean, how do you feel about the kind of that? I'm not a big fan of them telling us what to do. Like, I'm a big proponent of like my assets mine, and I should be able to do with what I want.
Yeah.
But obviously, government's been around for years, and we got to abide by rules and regulations. But I just found like all of a sudden since the pandemic, kind of seeing like a lot more rules popping up.
Yeah, I feel I guess it's a touchy subject. One, because I think in the public eye, property owners, landlords, if that's what you want to classify them as, kind of have a negative connotation with them. And like you mentioned, the vast majority of property owners are people that are just trying to supplement retirement. They have one property, maybe two. They're trying to, build wealth long term. It's not a get rich quick scheme. But there are a few bad apples in every industry, and
Absolutely.
there are a few bad apples that are landlords that kind of do paint a bad picture for it. And on the Airbnb side, I do feel like there should be regulations, because back in when COVID was going on, there's people renting out rooms with like in their house with a curtain across it, and it's like, okay, well, we have to have some sort of line in the sand of
Can't
what
just
is
Mickey
acceptable.
Mouse everything together.
Yeah, but at the same time, it is tough where if I'm buying a property and say I'm just an average, salary worker, and I've been saving up enough to buy a second property, and I run the numbers of that property based on a short-term rental, and say I bought it 12 months ago, and now if this comes into effect, if I switch over to a long-term strategy, my rents are my operating income on that property is going to be much lower, and I no longer can service that debt. Well, I am being forced to either take a loss or sell my property.
Right.
And if I bought it at at the height of the market, I could, be out quite a bit of money.
Right.
Due to that. What I think is the issue here, not the issue, sorry. What I think would be a better play, or something that I would like to see the government do, is instead of saying, we're going to change the regulations so you can no longer operate this way, well, can you instead incentivize a long-term rental and say, okay, all you short-term rentals, if you convert these to long-term rentals, because this is what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to say that we don't really mind that there's Airbnbs. We mind the fact that there's, tents in every park and there's people, there's a housing issue. We need to get long-term rents. And if, a large majority of our homes are short-term rentals, well, those could be long-term rentals. Let's force these short-term rental owners to make them long-term renters. So instead of saying we're going to force you to do that, can you incentivize a long-term rental? Can you give people tax breaks for having a long-term rental? Or can you come up with some creative way to benefit me changing my short-term rental to a long-term rental? I think that would be a better strategy, because like you said, it really could force a lot of people, into taking a big loss out of something they're trying to do to benefit themselves 20, 30 years down the road, not at the current moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my opinion, that's kind of exacerbating the problem if you're almost punishing people even to a further degree when they thought they were doing something in their best interest, and now all of a sudden the government's saying, well, it's not in our best interest or the greater population's interest. So the only other thing that I pivot back to is when we look at these government policies and strategies, I often wonder how deep of an analysis they do, because I was just at a Chamber of Commerce luncheon a few weeks ago, and they had a panel of members talking about housing affordability. And there was one guy in particular, I forget his last name, but Alex something. I want to bring him on to the show to kind of get the gist of what he was saying, but I didn't wholeheartedly agree with him because he kind of denied the kind of general basis of macro and microeconomics. He kind of said he knew better than that, which, general supply and demand typically, with low supply, high demand definitely drives upward pressure on pricing, and the vice versa typically applies if there's surplus of demand, downward pressure on pricing. Do you think that this rule, we mentioned the tents in the parks, do you think because you're not allowed to short-term Airbnb your property that's going to be a solution, or just because those people are probably so far out of the spectrum where it's just I don't see that additional supply fixing the tent problem? I think that's a total separate problem that revolves around the actual affordability in Halifax or even Nova Scotia to a degree. So that's kind of where I sit. It's how heavily are they looking into these solutions?
Yeah. And
are they looking at it at every angle possible?
It's a great point, because the question is, okay, if we convert these to long-term rents, okay, I'll convert mine to a long-term rental, but I'll be at top dollar because I need to try and get as close to short-term rentals as possible.
Right.
Are these people, and I will say this too, I use the tents as an example. There are still people out there that have good jobs that are, teachers, nurses, and that need to rent and that live with family members,
right.
Or
and there's just nothing for them.
There's just nothing for them. But the issue that you're talking about is the issue that the government's hearing. That's what the complaint is in the communities, is that there's no place to live, and the affordability of living in general. The food bank is up in its capacity, and so that is a really it goes so much deeper than trying to extend more opportunities for long-term rentals. The other thing that I don't think, which I know they didn't, the reason that this whole thing got postponed to the spring, this bylaw change, and that's because the tourism industry wasn't really consulted yet. And if you think back to this past summer, there was really very, very low vacancy in hotels here in the city, and Airbnbs accounted for 20% of night stays in August, for example, and that is a big chunk of tourism for our city. So the question is, another thing here is that they didn't consult with the tourism industry. So this could be something that never actually comes to play. The other thing is HRM is really big, goes quite far down to the South Shore. So Down when you start going down, so there's not a lot of hotels down there, but it is very big on tourism. So,
like Hubbard's down St. Martin's Bay.
Is this a Halifax Peninsula issue, or is it all of an HRM issue? I'm not sure. So it could be something where you come back and maybe the zoning, the actual area changes. I don't mind the strategy, but let's say, okay, you're going to do a long-term rental. Well, we're going to incentivize it instead of making you can amortize your mortgage for 35, 40 years. Let's bring down your obligation to pay your mortgage in order for you to allow a better cash flow property, so you can allow rents to be lower in your property, and say, okay, well, if we'll give you a 35 or 40 year amortization on your mortgage, as long as you make your rents a little more affordable, and put a guideline on what affordability means, then that is kind of maybe a better strategy. I don't know, but just an idea, I guess. Yeah,
that kind of leads me to a question. I was actually listening, and I don't know if you listen to their podcast or not, Chandler and Neil.
Yeah, they're great.
The Master Keys. Yeah, I listen to it all the time. They're from our brokerage as well at Remax, so shout out to Chandler and Neil.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for all the tips and tricks, all the investing. We'll be up there with you soon. But what I kind of took from one of their podcasts, they said that, or I think it was Neil that mentioned, in Toronto, they actually have some more creative kind of products and tools out there for people that are buying and selling, often at like a much better rate and a better amortization. And they kind of said, like, they make more per deal here, but they obviously, volume-wise, they don't make as many deals. So that might be the offset, most likely, of what they're offering. But apparently, like, their rates and everything and what they offer in terms of products in the lending sphere in kind of Toronto, Ontario, they're much more kind of aggressive and seemingly work better for what, like, people like me and you are trying to do. Do you have any kind of insights on some of them?
There is more options when you get outside of Atlantic Canada. There's more lenders, there's more products.
Is that purely population base?
Yeah, I guess the reason, each lender would have its own reason, but if you think of like R&D of creating a product and seeing if it works, it kind of starts there, and then it's like, okay, well, it'll then go kind of out west, and then sometimes it doesn't really make it out east. Our population is obviously not nearly as large, so that is, there's definitely more products and more lenders when you go to Ontario.
So the landscape of the competition there is just so much more aggressive that they just have to be a little bit more creative on what they're going to get.
Yeah, I think they're more in the forefront,
right,
of like what's happening, and
we're more
they react faster, and then a few years later, that product kind of trickles down to the East Coast.
Yeah, well, to that point, I can definitely attest, and I mentioned it in my reels. We were at the Bert Kreischer comedy show, the Bertie Boy Bert tour.
Shout out Bert.
Right, that's it. And anyway, my wife had kind of mentioned to me that the host had reached out to her before we went, and I was just like, honestly, I just wasn't really paying attention. I thought, it was just standard checking in like before we got there. But anyway, what happened was, like, apparently the registration's already happening in Toronto, and we did get our stay canceled via Airbnb. But, the host called us and was like, hey, super sorry, but, Airbnb canceled, but you don't got to go anywhere. Obviously, you're here. They're going to refund you. And then she was just like, send me some money. And, we kind of saved a couple of bucks because we didn't pay the fee. She waived the cleaning fee. So it's definitely starting there. And they kind of did it without warning. They're like, you're at your 28-day max. And they delisted her Airbnb. So it was
interesting.
Yeah, they kind of definitely reached over in Toronto and are definitely, like you say, a bit more reactive and changing a bit quicker.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with what's happening in Toronto with Airbnbs, but that's
I think you might still be seeing a lot more of those, like we mentioned prior, those foreign buyers coming in, buying up all the condos they're putting up, and then they're not living in them, and they're charging premium rent prices.
Parking money,
and, it might be a more exacerbated kind of issue there with rental availability.
Yeah, I'd also be curious to know what their vacancy is in Toronto, because that's the real driver here, right? It's just the fact that you put a listing up and it's gone in days with 50 people applying for it.
Right.
So I'd be interested to know of the Toronto vacancy numbers, if that's also a driver.
Yeah, could be, because I know they have, like, in some other markets, like out west and stuff, they have, like, vacancy taxes. Like, if your property sits vacant for X amount of days out of the year, like, they will tax you. They'll fine you, essentially, and be like, no, you got to get people in there. And I mean... Do I agree with the font? You know, I don't also agree with it sitting empty, but, you know, if I'm investing and actively out there, like, I'd like to have my places filled.
It goes back to my thing where, like, the government is here to serve the people and make sure that, you know, that people are safe. There's opportunities for people to live, shelter, food. And so I do agree with the right to be able to better... you know, the communities that they serve, the government. But my thing is how can you incentivize someone to do something versus force them
just
to do something?
Just take it away.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, ultimately, like you say, there's going to be, you know, some people are going to be resentful of that kind of forced action. Some people are just going to be put in a tough spot to start with if they really kind of lean into it. Like you said, like maybe got some clients that made some decisions based off short-term rentals. Now, you know, they're not cash flowing positive. Maybe they didn't put enough down and now they got to sell. Maybe they paid 20-30% over. Guess what? We're not getting 20-30% over right now. You know, hot properties, maybe 5-10% at best is what I've seen. Maybe 20 on the odd one. Yeah. Low competition versus like slugging away with like 20-30 other buyers. 17 offers are over 100K. So yeah, you could really be in some hot water right now, depending on, you know, your strategy at the time, what you bought, your mortgage rate, if you're fixed, variable. You know, a lot of stuff coming into play there. Next thing I kind of wanted to get into was the foreign buyer ban that they just announced. You know, looks like for the next couple of years, we're going to have no foreign investment possible from anywhere outside of Canada. The NSAR, so the Nova Scotia Realtors Association, as well as the Canadian Real Estate Association, they seem pretty disappointed with the decision. They say, from what I've read, they think that it's going to hinder our market some in the short term, you know, inside of those 2 years. Why? I haven't dug right into that. That might be kind of a separate episode or reel coming soon, but have you kind of dug into it at any rate, or how do you feel this is going to play out for you know, our real estate market? Is this going to affect the general public, or do you find that it's just going to be those big players that are kind of come in, park some money in some property, and just kind of, you know, let it ride?
Well, I think that's who they're targeting, and I think this play is more of a is more targeted to bigger cities, where you find a lot of foreign buyers, like you mentioned, where, you know, parking money in an asset like a piece of like a property, and letting it sit, appreciate, and then selling down the road is a good investment. And there is a number of investors who have no intention of moving here and living in it and are strictly buying it for that purpose. I don't know the numbers here in Halifax. I can't imagine they'd be that high, but I don't know. I would be interested to see what those numbers are, though. But I do think that, of course, this will affect the real estate industry. These are buyers. These are possible buyers that are now taken off the table. So anytime that happens, it's going to affect demand.
Absolutely.
And these are people who buy most of the times, you know, valuable assets, value properties. So yeah, I think that point is true. Do I think it's necessarily a bad thing? I don't know, to be honest. From my point of view, when I look, those kind of buyers usually don't come to a mortgage broker like myself so much, because a lot of times those are maybe purchasing cash.
Private.
Whereas myself, where I see and I get a lot of these questions are people who are here as a temporary resident, or, you know, maybe they don't have their Canadian citizenship yet, or their PR. So, or they're here on a work visa. So these people won't be affected by this program. So if you are here, say on a work visa, or you have your PR or working towards being a permanent resident, Canada's very, they're very bullish on immigration and bringing
Definitely.
new people into the country. So they are making sure that it's not going to affect those people, and they'll still have an opportunity to buy. So from a mortgage perspective, and in my perspective, I don't think I'll run into too many issues with this with current clients. But in terms of demand in the market, for the next 2 years, so this is a 2-year program, it'll be paused for 2 years. It'll lower demand in the short term of 2 years for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we might have some more opportunity, especially we're talking people with probably some pretty high net worth, so looking at multi-units, some higher level income dwellings. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and I'm sure we'll have some more to come here in the next little bit as they kind of roll that out. But yeah, like I said before, great rollout by the government. I mean, really could do a bit better, kind of keep
that one stuck up pretty quick.
Yeah,
that one stuck up pretty quick.
Well, that's what I was saying, in terms of overreach and are they putting thought into these programs and so on? If they're just shoving them out there, I mean, how much analysis is really being done in the background? And
Well, and I mentioned to you, there was CMHC had a really good link on it, and I went to it yesterday, knowing that the new year was coming up, and it was page not found, and I was like, oh no, where's this info gone? This is we're a week away, and I went to freshen up on it, and like you said, and so then I just Googled. I was kind of trying to Google more stuff, and there wasn't a lot about it, to be honest.
Right. Makes you wonder
the
how
one
much there
resource
is
that
to
I was
it.
kind of reading, a couple months ago, was no longer available. So, yeah, it's that point to you of yours is completely valid.
Yeah. So leading into kind of my next thing, we kind of brushed on kind of your business and how that might affect you, which is seemingly maybe not that much. One thing, kind of pivoting topics here that, I get asked a lot is what's the difference between, say, a mortgage specialist at RBC or Bank of Montreal or, pick an institution, what sets you apart from a mortgage specialist versus you're a mortgage broker?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is it would be that when you go to a specialist, when you go to your bank, they work for the bank. Their interests lie with the bank, whereas as a broker like myself or any mortgage brokers out there, they work for the client. They don't work for the bank. So that's the biggest difference. The client is the actual client. The client isn't the bank. So that would be the largest difference. The next one would obviously be the opportunities that we have. So when you work with a mortgage broker, it opens the door to many different lending opportunities and products, and a lot of times that in itself, when you work with that many different lenders, that many different products, you get a better understanding of mortgages maybe and the different nuances of each lender. So if I'm a mortgage specialist at RBC, I know RBC's products really well.
Absolutely.
And I don't know so much maybe TDs or Scotias or anyone else's. And a mortgage broker would have access to so many banks. They would probably also understand, they should understand, a lot more of the fine print with each one. And depending on your situation, a mortgage broker may lead you to a certain institution depending on, maybe you're new to Canada, maybe you want to buy a rental property, maybe you're a first-time home buyer, depending what it is. Every institution can service them, but there might be some that kind of fit better for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of one of the objections I often get, because I'm, obviously I want to refer business to my people, and obviously people have people that they already have in their spheres that they like to go to. But I found a lot of people really didn't understand, when I'd be like, hey, do you guys have a mortgage person or lender? Have you got pre-approved? And they're like, let's just say it's no. It's all right, well, do you guys bank with a specific bank? Do you want to go with a financial institution, or do you want to go with one of my kind of trusted mortgage brokers? And they kind of have really no idea what the difference is, and they're usually like, "Now we'll just go to the bank."
Yeah, I think that broker word as well, especially like back in the crash and investment broker, I think that sometimes still kind of lingers as a bad connotation with that word, maybe. But yeah, people bank with, say, RBC or Scotia or whoever you're with. You bank with them all your life. There's a trust there, right? So you know that, that institution's been around forever. You've walked in it how many times?
You can touch the stuff.
You can touch it. You can see offices. It. So that part is completely valid. That you like that bank, or you like that institution in general. And maybe some people do have really good connections with their financial advisor or their broker or whoever it is. And in that case, you got to do what's comfortable for you, right? So, and same with mortgage brokers. If you can reach out to a few, right? You don't have to just reach out to one person and make a decision. Contact a few brokers, and see what they like. Because if you don't, not everyone's going to click with everyone, right? But you will get in most circumstances, you should get an elevated service with a broker, where I mentioned they work for you versus the bank. And provide more services in that regard.
Now, would you say you keep in touch with your clients more often than say the bank? Because I know I've been here for 9 or 10 years, and I'm in real estate, and you know how many times I've heard from my mortgage broker, specialist,
client for life, for the life of your mortgage. Yeah, right? You'll hear from me.
But I haven't heard from my guy.
Yeah,
I haven't even got so much as a phone call or a referral. And he's got my money.
I have no comment.
So, refi's coming.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. It's But when you work for yourself, and you know this, how you differentiate yourself from other realtors is, your personality, your twist on how you do things, and some people are gonna really like that, and some people aren't, and that's fine. It's the same with the mortgage broker. If you're going to go buy a house, do you just do the first realtor, or do you go meet with a couple and see who you like? And that's the same. It's not. It is one of those things where there's so many people out there and so many realtors out there. Everyone can find someone that they fit well with. It's not a one size fits all. It's,
absolutely.
I can't service everyone in the city, and you got to find who you like to work with. And that's the big thing.
And you can't work with everyone.
That's right.
I mean, I'm sure you've had some hard lessons up front, and early on in my career too. Some people just you're not going to gel with, even though maybe you think so up, first couple meetings. I mean, sometimes things fall apart. I mean, it's just how life goes. But
that's how it goes. Yeah,
how she goes.
Yeah. So everyone's different. So like myself, every client gets a personalized budget, a personalized proposal. I don't like to use the word budget. It's kind of curse word, proposal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So everyone kind of they know what they're getting into. And down the road they want to refinance, figure it out. It's something that maybe not every institution would do. Also, making sure you understand the difference between variable and fixed.
A lot of people
understand the difference. Yeah, what you're getting yourself into. Like right now, especially with high interest rates, what's your strategy? Are you in the house long term, short term? What's your risk tolerance? Understanding your options is the big thing. Here are your options, and here's how each thing's work. You make the best decision based on what's best for you, but here's all the information.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that's the kicker is, you really kind of got to go in this with some proper thought. And I find don't be like the government. Don't be reactive. Be a little proactive. Do some research. If you're single or you got a partner or a spouse or wife, whatever you got, make sure you're on the same page. If you were one of those people slugging away 20-30% over ask and you're buying an investment property, well, guess what? You got to be looking out long term, because you're in the short term, look what happened. Interest rates went up, buyers pulled back, even sellers I can attest. I had to delist a property, just didn't. I mean, mind you, I told them they weren't going to get what they wanted, but they wanted to test the market anyway. And then you know how people get, they get kind of butthurt that you were right and they were wrong, and next thing they're out of the market altogether. But we got short memories. Do you rather slug it out and get top dollar for your property as a seller, or get the property you want as a buyer, paying 20-30% over asking, or today, cost of borrowing is a little high. Sure, competition's down. You can get something real nice, probably anywhere, at list right now. I mean, we don't have a ton of inventory, but yeah, people kind of just gotta, take stock of their decisions and kind of, be more methodical with it. And, right now, if you bought a property and, even 6 months ago and you're selling, like, you're probably out 30, 40 grand, 50, maybe more. Depends how much you overpaid. So it's one of those things. Yeah, people just have to have a plan. They gotta,
It's tough. I find too, the biggest thing, one of the big things that I think that my clients like is like you're saying, like, and even as you're saying all this, it's like sometimes you just need to talk. You just need to talk. You need someone to hear it and give their feedback, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying give a decision. I'm saying someone just needs to talk, say it, and talk with someone, put numbers on the board, run them. Okay, well, what if you purchase at this? Okay, well, what if it's at this rate? Okay, well, what if you do that? And those discussions are what gives you confidence in your decision.
Monumental, absolutely.
Yeah, so they're big.
And I'm a visual guy too, so like I know you shared a few. How did you say it?
Yeah, personalized proposals.
Personalized proposals. I was going to say budget, but I stopped myself. And I'm a visual guy, so I like to see the breakdown. I want to see, okay, well, if I buy at this rate at fixed or this rate at variable for X term here, maybe 3 year, maybe 5 year, maybe whatever, what's it going to cost me? And I mean, you can even plug in property taxes, all the expenses, and really down to the brass tacks, like what it's going to cost you, property taxes and all.
Yeah, lawyer fees, taxes, adjustments that need to be made for the lawyer for your property tax. There's a lot of things that you don't really consider, and for that matter, when you buy a home, you usually don't meet your lawyer a few days, a week before.
Right.
And you think your down payment's $20,000, all of a sudden it's $25,000. And
right.
Like, oh wait, there's $5,000 more. It's like a de-transfer tax.
Where's that going to go?
And so there's a lot to it. And what you're referring to with the personalized proposals is like that's my way of helping you make a more confident decision and just be more at peace with your decision. And that is, I'm a big proponent on visual as well. So all my clients get screen recordings of their budgets, how to use them. They can play around with the interest rate. They can play around with their down payment, with purchase price. So if they're on Viewpoint or they go view a property with you and they're like, oh, this is for sale for $510, but what if we offered $490?
Right.
Okay, or what if we were able to get it for $520? And it's like, okay, well,
run those scenarios.
Well, run the scenarios. Okay, well, the 3-year interest rate's $499, but the 5 years $474. So, and they start running all these scenarios. They can see what their actual monthly carrying cost is going to be, what the actual physical amount of money for their down payment, their closing cost is going to be, and instead of just making the emotional decision of the purchase, you then look at the financial side and you have more confidence in actually knowing what you're getting yourself into. And that's big.
Absolutely. I mean, I did zero of that when I bought this house. And
I think most people do.
Yeah. We went, my wife had this financial advisor at TD Bank that she'd worked with, good for her. Like, I didn't do this either. She had a financial advisor since she was old enough to work.
That's good.
Didn't shop around. Was just she's like, I've used this gal. Let's use her. Cool. All right. We looked at a million houses to the point I was even okay, this is getting a bit much. But yeah, I never did any homework. I thought buying the house here, and I mean, I'll be transparent. We bought this almost 10 years ago, and it was $212,000. The house behind me sold for $450. I mean, in the peak of it, I'm sure it's pretty close, $400. Yeah. But I had no idea. I was just throwing numbers on a spreadsheet that I thought, and just rough numbers. So to have somebody, basically what I'm getting to, in your corner that you can call. I mean, the more and more I've dove into it, it's people kind of shy away, I find, a little bit from third-party lending. Or is that improper? Is it not third-party?
So you're still, Yeah, no money comes through me. I should disclose that.
Right.
I never touch any money. You are directly associated. So if I take you to Scotiabank, you have a Scotiabank login. You use Scotiabank. You go into their thing. I'm merely the person connecting you to the bank.
Yeah.
So that can be a misconception as well.
Yeah, but you're always available to them too. And,
correct. Yeah.
And
I mean,
can always use, give out information and help, to
that's another big
weed
one
through
too,
those scenarios.
Trying to book an appointment with some of the bank can take a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah,
when you work with a broker, you usually have their cell number and you can call them, text them, email. It's a lot. There's the communication is streamlined, considerably, and the big one is when you're selling a property and buying a property.
Right. Bridging it over,
or like, okay, well, what if you say my house is worth $450? Well, what if I'm using that sale as a down payment? Well, what happens if you sell $430?
Right.
Tell me what that number looks like.
No idea. Probably it's less.
Well, yeah. How does that affect the down payment on the next one? Which means how does it affect my mortgage?
Yeah, it's a lot of kind of domino effect.
Yeah, you need to be able to see that. So same thing in those spreadsheets. Depending on what you're doing, there's a spread refinance, purchase. You want to sell, buy. You want to buy an investment property. There's one for no matter your circumstance. But you need to know, like, okay, you can plug in. It's like, okay, let's change it from $450. Worst case, we sell at $420. Yeah. Okay, I know that we're gonna have $95,000 now taken out. If we do the $95,000 down payment, okay, here's my mortgage versus like the $130. So it's like being able to play, like I said, being able to play around those numbers is huge. It's big, yeah. Absolutely. And when you buy, if you are holding long term like yourself, most likely your numbers are going to be fine.
Fine.
Right.
You only lose if you sell it.
If you sell quick, yeah. So in your situation, you're kind of laughing because your house is worth double. Well, you've been here 10 years. You were here 2 years. Right. So those questions also need to be addressed. Like, so, if you are, here and you're only you're young and you may move 3 or 4 times. Well, fixed rate, 5-year fixed rate probably isn't a good product. And if you go into it and in 2 years you try and get out and realize, it's going to cost me $13,000 to get out now. It's a big problem.
That is a problem. Now that kind of leads into the next one, right down to brass tacks, talking about rates for people that are wondering right now, closing out the year. We've had the Bank Canada raise interest rates now 7 times. Last one was another 50 bips. Where are we at with rates right now? What do we got on the fixed front? What do we got on the variable front? What's the latest and greatest there?
Well, the first time in a long time, shouldn't have been a while, the fixed are now better than the variable.
What's driving that, do you think? Well, historically, it's never been the case.
It's you have to understand is that the fixed rates and the variable rates, although a mortgage comes from a bank, where the bank draws that money from are 2 completely different places.
Okay.
And the variable rate is based on the overnight lending rate that the Bank of Canada sets, which is what you alluded to with those hikes. So as the Bank of Canada increases or decreases that rate, it affects your mortgage directly and affects the mortgages that you can get today or tomorrow at the lenders. So as that rate goes up or down, so does your mortgage. And obviously lately it's been going up, squeezing a lot of people. But also, actually, let's give a shout out to the stress test which the government put in place, because without that there'd be a lot more people in worse places, because you have to qualify. For those who don't know, you have to qualify for 2% higher than your rate, or 5.25. So back when people were qualifying at low rates, they had to qualify. When you were getting a 2% rate, you had to qualify 5.25.
Wow. So
you had to qualify. So they said, okay, if rates go up, we know that you're going to be able to afford it. So now, even if you're getting a variable rate now and say it's 5.5, you have to qualify at 7.5. So that's where this affordability thing's really getting, their purchasing power is dropping like every time they raise this rate.
So you're kind of like a double-edged sword here. They're pushing the rates up, and then although could be beneficial to some people, because some people just like to fucking spend money. Excuse my French. But that's a kind of a unique tool to kind of keep you in line with your actual ability.
It's been great there, but I think I skipped ahead there. Back to the point there, whereas the fixed rates are based off the bond market. So It's based more on the investing side, and the variable rate is based on more the Bank of Canada overnight lending rate. So the two have different indicators, although they are both kind of based on the economy, right, and what's happening.
Absolutely.
The big driver for the variable rates going up is just the inflation just being so high. Now, after this last hike, the Bank of Canada, for the first time since these hikes started, has alluded to slowing down. So depending on the numbers that come out from this month, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I wouldn't be surprised to see another hike in the new year, but then hopefully a pause, and maybe into the spring and the summer we'll see a pause. And who knows, maybe into the fall or into the new year we see some decreases, but the Bank of Canada has come out and also said that it's going to be about 24 months before these really start to take effect and rates to come back down. So we really don't know. I mean, this time last year the Bank of Canada literally came out and said if you want to, the rates won't change till 2023. And look what happens. So it's just based on the economy and what happens. So.
Absolutely. And I think it's, speaking of people with short memories, and I mean, we weren't buying houses then, but I have a client base from a past business that I've been going around dropping off cars to, making sure they kind of know I'm still there for them, although not in that business sphere now in current real estate. And they're a bit of an older demographic that would have bought in like the 80s. And I've been talking to them, and 6 of them mentioned it, because it always comes to the rates, talking about, real estate, first thing talking about rates.
Oh, you guys have it so good.
Yeah, seriously. They're like,
yeah.
I was like, what do you think about the rates? They're like, we don't feel bad for you. And I was like, excuse me? This sweet old lady. She goes, we've been in this house for 37 years. And she said, when we bought this house in 1983, we were paying 21% interest.
Crazy.
Another gal said she moved, it was a little bit later, maybe later 80s, early 90s, 18%. My uncle, same thing, he built a house, 19.5%.
Isn't that crazy? Holy smokes.
They are all still here, and they're still in their homes. Yeah. So, it could get worse, but I mean, let's be real, 5% isn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, now we're doing, the fixed are actually sub 5 right now, so right. you can get like the short term 3 years. This week there was some 4.99s, and the 5 years is like a 4.74. And yeah, when you look at historically, the 4.74, I mean, that's not a bad rate.
I think we were 3 something when we
were sub 2, so like we were in the ones.
Yeah,
and there would be a time when the example you just shared, it'll be funny in 20 years. It was like, and I don't know if they'll ever go back down that low. I mean, Toronto was giving 0.99 interest rates.
Wow. Back
in the middle of it, yeah, to think of it, and with HSBC. So it was. Rates won't go back to that. They'll go down. But the 3s and 4s, they're not awful rates. They're, especially 3s. 3s are good rates. But when you get up to the high 5s and in the 6s, it does start to get, unaffordable, because the housing prices are also
inflated.
And our prices here haven't really dropped that drastically compared to the rest of the country. And they're projected to still go up this year. So that, paired with the high interest rates, creates a tough atmosphere for buyers.
Absolutely, especially first times. Yeah, that's where it's hitting the most.
Yeah,
I think, is people that really want it in, that are like, fuck, we can't get.
But the government still has the first time home buyers incentive program right now, the Nova Scotia.
Right, tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's a 0 interest loan for the 5% of your home up to a $500,000 purchase price. So that program there can really help people get out of renting, because with rents being high, it's tough to save up a down payment of $20,000 or $30,000 while making rent payments, just living in general with the costs going up. So what the government's done is they've introduced this 0% interest loan repayable over 10 years. Basically, you get that loan and budget however much you take, whether it's a couple $100 a month, and pay that back, and it's a way to get you into property.
And you can kind of just like budget that into, that's just part of your mortgage.
Yep. Exactly. It goes a different way, but you budget that monthly amount too.
And just some clarification, you own your house fully at the end of that program when you repay that money.
Yep. So that's a loan. That's not like there are programs that the government will match your down payment, and they kind of have a stake in your. So if you're doing 5%, if you're a first-time home buyer, if you're putting 5% down, the government will match your 5% to lower your interest rate. They will. You kind of, you're getting into bed with them, and they want that 5% back when you sell.
Right.
Not 5% on the purchase price is
current value.
Yeah. So and it's not as cut and dry as that. Right. There is. So if your house doubles, you basically don't need to pay 5% of the double amount. There is a cap.
There's a prorated kind of.
But it
scale.
is. But yeah, the Nova Scotia first-time home buyer, the 5% down payment, that's your interest. That is you own the 100%.
That's all you.
Yeah, you pay that back over 10 years, just like if you're taking an RSP out of the bank to purchase and you pay it back over 15 years. It'd be very similar, but it's 0% interest, so it's a fantastic way to get into a property if you're renting.
Clients out in the wings there. You heard it here first. Let's get at it in the spring. So anyway, man, I don't want to take up all your afternoon. I know we're kind of leading into the holidays here. I think that's a good point to kind of wrap things up with. I appreciate you coming on. If people want to find where you're at, contact you, where's the best place to get you at? Instagram, Facebook?
Yeah, Instagram at Andrew Hutchison Mortgages. You can email me at Andrew Hutchison Mortgages. You can Google me and you can find me. And happy to answer any questions anyone has, or if you're looking to buy a house and get better idea of your numbers, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to help out.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure it won't be the last time we have you on. We'll get you on here to get any real estate relevant lending topics, I'm sure. Enjoy the holidays. Appreciate you coming on. And we'll post some links to your stuff in the bottom.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.